All right, man, peace. So the Golden State Warriors, they like to consider themselves a forward-thinking franchise. And being forward-thinkers, they like to make moves and transactions in anticipation of what they believe some of their top competitors may be making. And now, word around the campfires that they may consider trading Draymond Green and Klay Thompson to the New Orleans Pelicans for the great Anthony Davis. So, of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Hello again. Let's focus in on the Warriors, who now have won 3 chips in 4 years. Yes, sir. KD telling Rachel Nichols he wants to stay put, and their GM said Durant can get whatever he wants come contract time. The Warriors apparently want to keep their core 4 together, but have interest in Anthony Davis. How about that mouthful? According to The Athletic. On that note, Will Kane joins the conversation. Hello, Will.
Good morning, folks.
Good morning. Stephen A., I'm going to start with you. Will the Warriors have to change their core soon?
Let me say this very quickly. They may have to consider making a major move, especially if Draymond Green and Klay Thompson are intent on getting the max on their contract deals. They may have to consider trading 2 for 1. But who knows? Right now, their overall team identity is that they have multiple great shooters from the outside, and they have the guy who handles all the trash, everything that no one else wants to do, in Draymond Green. Can Anthony Davis bring to the table what those 2 players bring in combination? I'm not quite sure about that. Anthony Davis has shown that he oftentimes has difficulty remaining healthy for an entire season. But he has shown that he can be a transcendent player, especially in this past season's playoff run. He finally broke through and was able to show how dominant he could be. In his other playoff run against the Golden State Warriors back in 2015, he was dominant there as well. So the true question with Anthony Davis is how healthy he can maintain himself throughout an 82-game season and what most likely would be about a 20 to 22 game playoff run. Now, what Klay Thompson brings to the table is great clutch shooting, great outside shooting, great man-to-man defense. Of course, Draymond Green is probably the best Swiss Army knife in basketball right now.
I don't think they have to. Anybody, first of all, let's be clear. Anybody that's got a chance to get Anthony Davis, you're going to get Anthony Davis. And if you got to alter stuff, you're going to do it. Having said all of that, let's be clear about something here. When you look at the Golden State Warriors, they don't have to do anything immediately.
I agree with that. Now, Steve Kerr and their GM Bob Myers are on record as stating that they want to get younger on their bench. So that most likely means that Zaza Pachulia is out and David West is out. And maybe even Nick Young is out as well. I think that of those 3 players, the only player that may have a good chance of coming back to the team is David West. But I think that they're certainly interested in possibly considering acquiring Anthony Davis if they can, especially if LeBron James signs with either the San Antonio Spurs or the Boston Celtics. If the Boston Celtics are able to do what I've been talking about, they may consider doing and probably should consider doing, which is signing LeBron James and trading Kyrie Irving, Jaylen Brown, and a first-round draft pick to the San Antonio Spurs for Kawhi Leonard. If the Celtics are able to do that, the Golden State Warriors may have to consider doing something drastic, because that is going to be a titanic matchup. Or they may just say, you know what? Let's make the Boston Celtics show us that they can beat us. Let's stand pat right now. If we can't beat them with Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond, and Klay, and our cast of supporting characters, then we'll make a major move in the offseason. But the Golden State Warriors may believe that they can still beat the Boston Celtics, even with LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard on that squad with their supporting cast. That is going to be a bodacious finals if the Boston Celtics can get that done.
Beat them. Now, I know Max is fond of saying you wait too late to make moves.
Yeah,
well, you know what? When you've been to 3 finals, when you won 3 championships in the last 4 years, having gone to 4 straight NBA finals, you might have won 4 straight if it wasn't for that damn stimulus package the NBA handed to you by suspending Draymond Green.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the reality is that you could make the argument, I guess, that again at some point in time you got to alter things. But my attitude is the way the league is constructed, the way the league rules seem to, or Golden State has built themselves catering to those league rules, and it's worked so well for them. I say you stand pat. You make a move for right now.
Here are the competing arguments.
Okay.
One, trade him a year too early instead of a year too late. I say that frequently. That's Branch Rickey, who helped Jackie Robinson break the color barrier in Major League Baseball and invented the farm system in baseball. Brilliant guy. Trade him a year too early instead of a year too late. We see this time and again in sports. And I think most recently with Seattle. And we debated this. I think history has proven me right. Get rid of the Legion Boom before it feels like it's time.
Now, let me say this. If they could find a way to trade Draymond and Klay Thompson in a first-round draft pick, or maybe their first-round draft picks for the next 2 or 3 years, for Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday, I may consider that trade. I may consider that trade if I'm Golden State, even before a LeBron James would sign with Boston. But I don't think that New Orleans would do that trade. I think that would be them giving up too much to just get back Klay and Draymond. I just think that right now the synergy on the Golden State Warriors is so good that they don't need to do anything right now. Their players are too young to do anything right now. I think that you make a trade like this, maybe if Klay and Draymond were both 31 or 32. But at 28, nah, not yet. They're basically entering their prime.
Be smart about this. Belichick does that, as you said, Molly. Another competing argument here is you have a chance to get Anthony Davis, if you do. Without touching Steph or KD, if you can add Anthony Davis without touching your 2 best players, you have to. You have no choice. You must get Anthony Davis.
That's a good point. It's a valid point.
But here's the thing, guys. The Warriors have not only won consecutive championships, they won it in 9 games. It took them 9 games to win 2 chips in the finals.
That's my point, Max Kellerman. They've been so dominant that I'm not sure that you have to make any moves yet. Let's make the Boston Celtics or the San Antonio Spurs or the Houston Rockets show our squad that we definitely have to make a move that is mandatory, that is not voluntary.
Finals. They're really, really good still. They don't have to disrupt their core 4, right? Steph, KD, Klay, Draymond. But you know what they do have to do, Stephen A? They have to get the details right. They have to do what San Antonio did. It's not just that they went from David Robinson and Tim Duncan that eventually to Kawhi Leonard, with Tony Parker and Ginobili in between. They got the details right. They got Patty Mills right, and Boris Diaw right, and Danny Green right.
That's why I mentioned the Golden State Warriors bench. I think that Steve Kerr and Bob Myers realized that they have to get better on their bench. They need more skilled players on their bench, as opposed to players who can just come in and do one thing. When Nick Young comes into the game, if he doesn't make 2 or 3 three-pointers for you, he's basically of no use. And I give Nick Young credit. He actually tried to play defense this year in his few minutes on the court. Zaza Pachulia, at this point in his career, his feet are just too slow. He really can't do anything. I mean, unless he's sticking his foot under the opposing team's best player, what really does he bring to the table other than being an enforcer? I'll give him credit for that.
That's the kind of stuff that Golden State must do now. They must get those details right. Don't have to touch the core 4 because they're still destroying everyone. You got to get those details.
I don't understand why you use the San Antonio Spurs as a model. They've never won back-to-back. The fact of the matter is that, again,
Well, Stephen A. Smith, his point is that San Antonio has been able to get it right when it comes to the little guys. And he makes a valid point because, once again, Steve Kerr and Bob Myers have made a point of noting that they need to improve their bench. Patty Mills would actually be a great addition to the Warriors.
That's the one thing they haven't pulled off. They've won. They're obviously a first-class organization.
And that's another reason why I think that if the Warriors have a chance to sign Trevor Ariza, that would be a great pickup for them. If you could bring Trevor Ariza in off the bench, and he's only giving you 15 to 20 minutes, and you could team him with Iguodala and Sean Livingston, oh, man.
But they stayed great for 20 years.
Let's get Will in here, too. Will.
When you talk about Max, you'd rather trade somebody a year too early than a year too late. I assume you're referencing, I think we all know, you're referencing Klay and Draymond, right? It's whether or not you would put Klay and Draymond on the block to bring...
And let me say this also. The premise of trading someone a year too early rather than a year too late, that really goes back to the Boston Celtics of the 1980s. The Boston Celtics had an issue where they drafted a great young player by the name of Len Bias in 1986, who was supposed to carry on after Larry Bird and Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish retired. Well, he died of a drug overdose on draft night. And Larry Bird has always stated that the death of Len Bias precipitated the fall of the Boston Celtics. That's why they were pretty much irrelevant in the 90s because of Len Bias's death. Len Bias was supposed to act as the bridge between the Larry Bird Celtics and the Paul Pierce Celtics. Len Bias, in combination with Reggie Lewis, was supposed to carry that team through the 90s. Reggie Lewis also died from a heart malady. So after that, the Boston Celtics, led by Red Auerbach, always stated that we should have let go of our main guys, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish. We should have traded them away earlier. And we didn't. We held on to them for too long, and it led to us struggling throughout the 1990s, really throughout the early 2000s. Now, the Boston Celtics, they had a little spots of success in the early 2000s. I believe they got to an Eastern Conference Finals against the New Jersey Nets. But other than that, they pretty much had to wait until 2008 until they were a championship contender again. And that all was precipitated by the death of Len Bias and the death of Reggie Lewis, and also the Boston Celtics' timidity in trading their top players.
Bring back a guy like Anthony Davis.
Right.
Well, I understand that. I understand that maxim. I understand Branch Rickey. I understand baseball. But, maybe this is a saying in Texas or, in other parts of the country. But I tend to think if it isn't broke, you don't fix it. Let me say.
I partially agree with that. There's a slogan saying that perfect is the enemy of good. There are a lot of people in life that are living a good life, and they mess it up because they believe that there's a perfect life out there for them. There are people who are in a relationship with someone who's good for them, and they let that person go because they have an archetypal figure of that perfect significant other in their mind, and they fuck it up and they end up messing up their whole life. You have people out here 55 years old who are still thinking about the boyfriend or the girlfriend that they had when they were 21, and they messed it up because they were out there searching for this perfect archetype that they thought existed for them. So sometimes you have to ride out something that's good to great, because sometimes what you think is perfect is really not.
Let me say that a little more colloquially. If it ain't broke, you don't fix it. This thing is working on 3 titles in 4 years. And the sin that I think anybody being too cute about playing like a video game here, like playing NBA 2K, well, if you can get Anthony Davis, you get Anthony Davis. The sin I feel like you're committing is you're taking things for granted. You're, number one, taking it for granted that this thing rolling 3 and 4 years can actually even be better.
Thank you, sir.
The entire NBA is chasing the Golden State Warriors, the Boston Celtics, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Houston Rockets are obsessed. The entire thing is geared with chasing you. And as you just said, Max, the best that anybody can do right now in the finals, at least, is win 1 game over 2 years. So don't take for granted, and I don't think you do, but don't take for granted how good this thing is.
Will,
and
would you trade Klay and Draymond for Anthony Davis? Yes or no?
I think that that's something that you truly have to think about. When you combine Klay and Draymond's production together, you're going to come out with something like 35 points a game and 15 rebounds a game and somewhere around 12 assists a game. Anthony Davis is not going to bring you all that productivity. And then also keep in mind that Draymond Green is always combating with Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, and DeAndre Jordan for the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year. So those 2 players, they bring a lot to the table. And who's going to replace the defense that Klay Thompson plays on the opposing team's best perimeter player? You can't just run Iguodala out there for 35 minutes anymore.
No.
No, that's where we disagree.
But let me tell you.
That's why I stated that if New Orleans were to sweeten the pot by throwing in Drew Holiday, then I will probably give that trade the green light. But Klay Thompson and Draymond Green just for Anthony Davis, I'm not quite sure about that. I mean, if it went down, of course, Golden State would have to make it work. But I'm not sure if I would do that right now. I would have to make the rest of the NBA show me that I have to make a drastic move like that. Especially when we're a team that has won 3 of the last 4 championships, and we just beat Anthony Davis's team in 5 games.
My second reason will tell you why, and it's not because I don't think Anthony Davis is awesome. Obviously, he's incredible. But I don't take for granted how and why this Warriors project works. And the key concept is sacrifice, and it hasn't been easy.
And also synergy, sacrifice and synergy.
Draymond has sacrificed money. KD has sacrificed money. Klay has sacrificed shots. Steph has sacrificed points per game more than anybody in the league. He sacrificed something like 14 points per game by having KD on the floor. It's sacrificed through and through for a team concept. Now, Anthony Davis is an unselfish player, but I don't take for granted that just happens.
Brother, AD can do everything Draymond can do plus, and you can get a 3-and-D guy to approximate what Klay can do if you still have Steph and KD.
Really, sir? You think so? You think that you can get a 3-and-D guy to approximate what Klay Thompson does? Did you see what Klay Thompson did in Game 6 against the Houston Rockets just this past season? Did you see what Klay Thompson did in the 2016 playoffs in Game 6 against the OKC Thunder? There's something about those Game 6s when the Warriors are down 3-2. That guy rises to the occasion. No, sir, you cannot just find any 3-and-D guy to replace Klay Thompson. This is why guys like Max Kellerman, know-it-all analytics nerds, become general managers with these various NBA basketball teams, and they get fired in 2 seasons because they think that anyone can replace anyone. And no, they cannot. You cannot just replace Klay Thompson, who probably at this point is what, a 3 or 4-time All-Star? You cannot just replace him with a quote-unquote 3-and-D guy. No, sir.
I don't think a GM could possibly turn that deal down.
I agree with Maxwell. There's no way. I mean, if not that it's going to happen, because I assure you it won't. The Pelicans want to hold on to Anthony Davis for dear life. Make no mistake about it. A matter of fact, with the way he and Drew Holiday played, you got some people out there asking, how come a player the caliber of LeBron doesn't decide to go to New Orleans and join Anthony Davis and Drew, even though that ain't happening. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is this. Anthony Davis.
That would be a viable option for LeBron. Even though I'm not quite sure about the logistics of it, I don't know how much cap space the New Orleans Pelicans have, and I don't know why LeBron would not want to go sign with them. I mean, that's up for someone else to edify me about, but one would think that that might be a good decision for LeBron. Now, just looking at their team roster, I think that it may be difficult for LeBron to fit in with a Rajon Rondo. Rondo would have to come in off the bench because if he's going to play with LeBron, we all know that LeBron has to dominate the basketball. And Rajon is not someone who likes to have someone else dominating the ball. He is a basketball savant himself. So that might be a reason why LeBron wouldn't fit there. But one would think that with Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis, that could possibly be a viable option depending on how much cap space they had. But in my view, the best 2 locations for LeBron in regards to winning would be the San Antonio Spurs and the Boston Celtics.
Even though that ain't happening. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is this. Anthony Davis is if not once in a generation, he's a generational player.
Well, Anthony Davis is a player that has the potential to be what Hakeem Olajuwon was in the late 80s throughout the 90s. That's what he has the potential to be, and he's on his way to being that.
When you look at the fact that he's 6'11", and he can play 6'10", 6'11", he can play 4 different positions defensively. Okay, offensively, he can do that too because he's got an inside-outside game. He religiously averages 28 and 12. If you're talking about, and I'm not advocating this under any circumstances, nor do I think it's going to happen, but if you had a chance to get Anthony Davis and the sacrifice was to give up Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. Draymond Green, I think, is brilliant defensively. He's a glue guy. He's the ultimate glue guy, not to mention the fact that he can defend.
Not to mention the fact that he very rarely ever gets seriously hurt, which we cannot say about Anthony Davis.
And he gives you an attitude that doesn't allow you to get too lax.
Also, please keep in mind that the Golden State Warriors oftentimes run their offense through Draymond Green, predicated off of the notion that he can bring the ball up and he can find open shooters. The architecture of their offense would have to completely change if they traded away Draymond. Steph Curry is going to have to run a lot more of the point.
And that's underappreciated in the world of professional sports where you got 82 regular season games.
Draymond's a great player. He's a great player.
Right? And Klay Thompson, you know how I feel about him as a shooter and a player. But if you're talking about Anthony Davis with Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, I think that any executive that turns down the opportunity to have that should be tested immediately.
Will, how do you answer the idea that the history of the NBA is team that gets the best player wins the deal? It's almost every single time it's ever happened. Whichever team gets the best player wins the deal.
Well, that's proven false over the last 3 of the last 4 NBA championships. So that's my answer to that.
Thank you, sir. I mean, I think that's very basic. The team that gets the best player wins the deal. How could you have won 3 of the last 4 NBA championships and think that you're going to improve your team? I mean, that's pure speculation. I'm not saying that it's impossible because Anthony Davis is a great player who's burgeoning, he's growing. But I think that for him to be a viable option, like for example, just to make this comparison, when the Philadelphia 76ers acquired Moses Malone in 1982, at least he had shown that he was able to lead his team to the championship round in 1981 because they lost to the Boston Celtics in 81. And Moses Malone was something like a 2-time MVP before they acquired him. Anthony Davis is not on that level yet. I mean, he has a long way to go. A lot of what we're prognosticating about Anthony Davis is based on potential. He's like a stock that we expect to grow in value, but he's not there yet. We already know what Draymond Green and Klay Thompson bring to a championship formula. So I don't think that it's a sure thing that the Golden State Warriors should trade Draymond Green and Klay Thompson for Anthony Davis. No.
Unless you're willing to concede now that KD is the best player on the planet.
No. In a trade, the team that gets the best player in the trade always wins the trade.
Here's my response to that. And see, I don't want this to come off as some kind of I'm doubting or I'm discounting AD as an individual player. But you guys, while you sang the praises of Draymond and you sang the praises of Klay, what I think is missing here is they are not just great, but perfect for this team.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Will Kane.
What Draymond does for this team is like compound interest. It just keeps gaining value. Now, maybe, Max, you're right. The AD fits right in and does all the same things. It's not a comparison of them as individual players. Obviously, Anthony Davis is better. But for this team, you're taking for granted not just Draymond, but Klay as well. And as long as I'm spinning Southern colloquialisms here, how about this one? A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. I think this team goes in next year and wins another NBA title.
I agree.
That's 4 to 5 years. I don't know how you can project out 2 to 3 years and say, Steph, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, that's titles coming in.
Let's not forget that they played on the road in a Game 7 against Houston that didn't have Chris Paul, the emotional leader of that team.
Let's also remember that they played in Game 7 on the road in Houston without Andre Iguodala, their best perimeter defender, and had they had Andre Iguodala, that series would have been over in 5 games. Let's please remember that the Houston Rockets had Chris Paul in games 4 and 5. The Golden State Warriors did not have their best perimeter defender, at least coming off the bench. I will give Iguodala an edge in perimeter defense over Klay Thompson just because of his intelligence and also the quickness of his hands. And still, games 4 and 5 came down to the very end. The Golden State Warriors lost game 4 because of terrible execution down the stretch. And in game 5, they were still right there, even without their best perimeter defender. You bring Iguodala back, that's a 5-game series. But for some reason, many of the defenders of the Houston Rockets, they choose to omit those facts.
And they still won by single digits in spite of the fact that Houston shot 1 of 30 from outside.
Right, sir, but that happened. You just can't look at that series or that game and say, well, they shot 1 of 30. That will never happen again. You're a boxing commentator, Max Kellerman. You should understand the notion that when you weaken your opponent to the body early in the early rounds, in the later rounds it's going to show in their ability to punch with authoritativeness, to utilize their footwork, etc. The Golden State Warriors were able to run the Houston Rockets into the ground the first 4 to 5 games of the series. They were able to go deeper into their bench, and it took a toll on Houston that they played such high-level defense and were so concerned with stopping the off-the-ball movement of the Golden State Warriors, and it showed in their inability to make threes in games 6 and 7 down the stretch. They wore out because it's so hard to defend that team, the Golden State Warriors. It's difficult to defend them because you're chasing them all around the court on the defensive end, and then you're asking their role players like Trevor Ariza and PJ Tucker to make 3-pointers on the offensive end, and they have no legs. There's a reason why guys are not making jump shots. They have weak legs. Just like in a boxing match, there's a reason why guys stop moving. They're getting hit to the body early on in the fight. You have to pay attention, Max Kellerman.
They were lucky to get to the finals. They always...
No, sir. There's no such thing as luck when you get into the NBA Finals and you're playing 7-game series.
Is Golden State not your favorite?
My point is...
I'm just saying this, so Golden State's not your favorite.
I need to see what happens in the offseason. So I understand your point. This is what's interesting to me about this. I guess this is what I'm saying. You know how I say in the NBA, guys, you don't break a dollar into 4 quarters, which is what the Cavs did when they traded Kyrie.
All about the idioms.
But I also think you do trade two 75-cent players into a dollar player. It seems like you're losing money on the deal, but if you can get that dollar bill, go get it, and that's what AD is.
Listen, guys, this...
I'm not sure about that. Not when you already have a championship formula. I could see what Max Kellerman was saying if Golden State was the team that couldn't get over the hump. That's why I made the analogy to the Philadelphia 76ers in the early 80s. They kept getting to the finals, but they couldn't win. And then they got Moses Malone, a transcendent player, a dominant front court player, and he got them over the hump. Or even the Detroit Pistons in the late 80s. They traded Adrian Dantley for Mark Aguirre, and they were able to get over the hump. Right now, the Golden State Warriors, they don't need to get over the hump. They are the hump. So there's really no need for them to trade two of their best players who fit in perfectly with that system for Anthony Davis, no matter how great Anthony Davis currently is or may be.
This is fun fantasy basketball and all, but we know they're not getting AD. They just need to worry about staying healthy.
Well, I think the important point...
Thank you, Molly Caron. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, that's all they need to worry about is staying healthy.
The point to recognize is the fact that they'd be willing to change things
for that type of player.
For that type of player, because when you're winning championships, there are a lot of times people want to stand pat. People think they should stand pat. In the case of the Golden State Warriors, you got the ownership and the executive branch basically saying, look, we're going to keep our eyes on the ball.
Yeah. Yes, Williams, you get the last word.
Quick question. Yeah, quick question. I know you need to go. I'll leave this to Stephen A. He's the expert in basketball.
Stephen A. Smith, yeah.
Allegedly.
A lot these days. Right. Did not the Bulls...
Stephen A. Smith being a resident basketball expert on the panel, that's like winning an award for being the tallest midget at the pageant. Like, give me a break. Stephen A. Smith never played in the NBA. For him to allege that he's an expert in basketball, as Charles Barkley is so fond of saying, the only expert is God.
Bulls of the 90s break that thing up just a little too quickly, just a little too cute.
What do you
that
mean
thing
break?
have had one more?
Jordan retired.
Well, Jordan retired the first time.
Well, the reason why Jordan retired after the second three-peat was basically because the Bulls front office gave the entire team a mandate that they were not going to bring back Phil Jackson.
Time, then they won another three-peat.
I'm talking about 98, 98, 99.
Well, no. What happened, Will, is that Jordan he announced that he would definitely retire. He was not going to play without Phil Jackson. Jerry Krause and those boys were determined that Phil Jackson be gone so they could bring in Tim Floyd, who Jordan called Pink Floyd.
You bring Jackson back, you bring Jordan back. A little too early.
And they definitely left a championship on the table, because had the Bulls came back and played that 99 season, they would have won the championship again.
All
right, that'll do, gentlemen. 3 chips.
But anyway, I thought that this was a very interesting conversation in regards to the possible trade for Anthony Davis, giving up Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. Do not sleep on the importance of Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. They have a lot of equity with that franchise for their exploits in big games, especially Klay Thompson, who tends to come up huge in big games. And then the fact that he is so low maintenance that Steve Kerr calls him no maintenance. And I'm not saying that Anthony Davis is a high maintenance player, but at least in regards to his health, he is, or potentially could be, because he has a history of being injury prone. Klay Thompson does not. As a matter of fact, Klay Thompson has a history of suffering what appear to be major injuries and then coming right back into the game 15 minutes later and shaking it all off. But anyway, remember, perfect is the enemy of good. Do not throw away something good or great that you have because you believe that something is quote unquote perfect out there for you. So peace.